Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Seminole Sidelines. It is Wednesday, July 19th, and we've got a great show planned for you. Ariya, Massoudi, Curt, Weiler of the Osceola joining you here, and we do have a very special guest also hopping on the podcast here this afternoon. None other than the man, the myth, the legend, Ryan Kelly, sports director of WCTV. And if that background looks familiar for those of you watching, he is my roommate, actually. Not today. Currently, I'm in Connecticut. He is holding down the fort in Tallahassee. Like the Seminole cap behind you. I think you got a little Terrence Mann bobblehead as well. But Ryan, more importantly, we are grateful for you joining this show and appreciate you joining us for a couple of minutes. What an exciting summer for FSU athletics.
I feel like it would have been better if you just hadn't addressed it at all and just let people think I'd broken into your house. That would have been a lot of fun. But yeah, guys, of course, thanks for having me on. You know, this three's known each other for a long time. This is a nice, fun little reunion show. Happy to talk a little bit of Noles and a little Noles baseball at the end of July. So yeah, let's get to it.
Yeah, a lot to get to. Curt, first and foremost, let's jump right in. We've got the ACC Football Kickoff coming up next week in Charlotte. All three of us will convene there at the Westin, and it'll be 3 days this year. For the first time, they will have 3 separate days. And Florida State announcing that Jared Verse, Jordan Travis, no surprises, will be joining Mike Norvell. But Kalen DeLoach also getting the nod to come up and represent we'll call it the back seven, so to speak, of Florida State's defense alongside his teammates. What are you most looking forward to, and what do you make of Florida State's selections of Travis, Verse, and DeLoach?
I mean, I always look forward to getting up there. It feels like it's always, I mean, ACC Kickoff is always kind of a major milestone event on the path back to football. I mean, once we get done up there, we're probably less than a week out from the start of preseason camp, as crazy as that is. So it always feels like kind of like football isn't back yet, but it feels like a major step towards that. We get the preseason All-ACC team, which after there was not much Florida State representation last year, I would imagine there's going to be a lot this year at ACC Kickoff. Obviously, the expectations are going to be a little different around Florida State. It'll kind of be the first time in a while that Florida State's been the team that has those expectations. And I know that a lot of the national media type, probably a lot of the people who cover other schools are going to kind of want to talk about that. And I'll be interested in what Florida State says. If I had to bet, they won't say much, and they'll kind of downplay the notion of outward expectations. That's kind of been the message so far this offseason of focusing inward. The selections, I mean, I'd say, yeah, I mean, Jordan and Jared make a lot of sense. Jordan, I think so. I have a message out actually to FSU SID Derek Satterfield. Jordan's got to be the first FSU guy and probably one of the first guys overall to go to kickoff 3 times. He was there in 21 with McKenzie. He was there last year as like the known established starter now going back for kind of the victory lap, the 5th year at Florida State. But yeah, Jared Verse, I think, is going to be a guy who's going to steal the show. I think he's a guy who, I mean, people know the player he is, but maybe outside of Florida State don't kind of know the personality. I'm sure there will be a lot of good quotables from his media session. I think he's a guy who's going to become a bit of a media darling up there. It feels like there's always a player or two who really catches on with the national media, and I think that could very well be him. And Kalen's a guy, so it's interesting. I would have probably leaned or thought it would be Fabian Lovett, who was there last year. But I think there is a notion. I was talking to someone else on the beat this morning at the availability about having a homegrown guy there, like Kalen DeLoach. I mean, so much of this transfer, this team has been built on transfer additions, but Kalen's a guy who didn't sign for this staff, actually signed for the prior staff, but this is year 5 at Florida State. He signed with Florida State out of high school. It's kind of gradually grown into a really important player on this team. And so I think it makes sense to have that representation. I also think he's a very natural fit, charisma-wise. I think will fit in nicely, seems to enjoy those media opportunities. And so it's a great opportunity for him, no doubt.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I thought that if it wasn't going to be Fabian Lovett this year, maybe you'd bring another offensive guy, especially with the hype surrounding that side of the football. Maybe a wide receiver, maybe a Johnny Wilson, maybe a Trey Benson, who, of course, we even saw earlier this summer was tied with Jordan Travis at a media availability, is tied with him in some advertising, some NIL stuff as well. I thought it might be somebody there. But, yeah, I mean, Kalen's a beyond worthy pick. And I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but I'm interested to see how Florida State is perceived, like you said, Curt, by the media at large. It certainly feels like when you read a lot of the national preseason stuff, folks are really drinking the Garnet Kool-Aid from a national perspective. It's not just local buzz and well, the media doesn't quite get it here. And then, no. It seems like people are really bought into what this Florida State team can be in 2023. And I want to see just how much that plays out in a conference that in pockets can feel a little insular in how people think, the way the ACC does, where Tobacco Road kind of thinks a certain way, Florida thinks a certain way, the Northeast thinks a certain way, Clemson thinks its own way, So I want to see how that plays out with when you get all these media types together in one room in Charlotte at the Western this next week.
That was something I was going to ask both of you, Ryan. I appreciate you parlaying into it. What does it say that Mike Norvell chooses 2 defensive guys to come and represent Florida State? What does that say about maybe the confidence that they have in the leadership of that unit, right? Because all the accolades so far, and while I think everybody expects FSU's defense to be pretty good, the headline, right? The headliner, the main act has been offense. That's what everyone's expecting, this explosive offense. But what does that say in both of y'all's opinions, whoever wants to take it, that Mike Norvell is bringing 2 defensive guys to come represent the university amongst their peers in Charlotte next week?
I think it's kind of a message on one end to the team of, Mike Norvell has always been about this being a team thing. This is not a one-person thing. This is not, we're going to put our playmakers in space. We're going to do that. We're going to showcase people through the schemes that we run. But it's always been very much about family. It's been about togetherness. And I think this might even be a little bit of a message of, listen, we get all the headlines are about how many points we're going to score and the offensive line and how many starts there are. This is as good a front seven as anybody in the country, save for maybe that team in red and black in Athens. So this is a really good squad. And by the way, it's mature. It's got plenty of leadership. It's got lots of guys who've been there, done that, and know how to handle themselves in a big stage like ACC Kickoff. So I certainly think there may be a little something there, especially with the idea of, as a message to all the folks in that room who are going to want to talk about Jordan Travis and that offense. Hey, guys, we plan on not just scoring a lot of points, but holding our opponents to a little as well.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the importance of the defense and the how the defense is going to need to play. I mean, like Ryan's talked about. I mean, if this team's going to achieve, I think what it thinks and what some other people definitely think that the Seminoles are capable of. I mean, Kalen DeLoach has probably as much as anyone has become. I mean, gone from. I mean, he's kind of had that the path you expect guys to take of redshirting, of taking their turn, of becoming a reserve player, and now, I mean, the last 2 years. Now going into his 3rd year as a starter and as, I mean, a really important linebacker in the middle of that defense. And I think, I mean, we know what the offense is. And I mean, yes, there were plenty of offensive guys you could have brought and probably even a couple other defensive guys you could have brought. I mean, Tatum, Bethune, and Renardo Green, both we talked to today, are both going to be important guys who've been around for at least a little while now. But yeah, I think it speaks to, I mean, you're making it clear of, that's what we need from the defense. And I think it's maybe even a bit of messaging of, yeah, I mean, this defense is not to be overlooked, even if the offense, like we've said, kind of draws the headlines.
For me, guys, it's like Jordan Travis was going to go, right? I mean, 100%. That's who most people want to talk to. It's an opportunity for the national media. It's almost like a car wash for him, right? And he gets a chance to kind of represent FSU in a season in which I think this is as high of expectations outside of Tallahassee as we've also had in a while. Jared Verse, so personable. Both of you have alluded to that. He's going to do great. For me, DeLoach, though, it's an older guy in a position that I think hasn't gotten the storylines that some of the others have on the defensive line. They've talked a lot about the defensive line. The linebackers haven't been touched on. There have been some people who have been actually saying that could be the weakness for FSU this season on a team that might lack weaknesses. And I think also the DBs, there are so many new faces and so many youngsters in that back end of that the defense that I think DeLoach made sense. And he's been here a while, deciding to come back, and playing another year with Florida State. I think that was a reward. And I think at the same time, Florida State, did they bring 3 last year, Curt? We went. I don't remember. I think it was just 2, right?
It was 3. I think this is the 3rd year of every ACC team brings 3. It's not like you choose how many you bring. Last year was Jordan, Fabian, and Jamie Robinson.
That's the one I was forgetting. Okay, yeah. And so, it's big for FSU to be going out there to represent themselves. But I think we're looking forward to FSU. Is there anything you want Mike Norvell to touch on? Is there anything specifically that, Derek Satterfield's done a great job of making just about everyone available this summer, and Norvell's been really open. So I think we've covered most everything with Florida State. But is there anything that you're hoping to get out of that week in Charlotte?
I'm interested how the vote breakdown, not that it means anything in the grand scheme of things, but I think we assume Jared Verse is going to be the preseason defensive player of the year. I would have to bet, as a guy with the upside he has, is a guy who was a first-team All-ACC defensive lineman and is now back. The question becomes, I don't think Jordan Travis is going to win preseason offensive player of the year, just because there are going to be more North Carolina representatives there, and I think it's going to go to Drake May if I had to bet. I mean, Drake May beat out Jordan for first-team All-ACC last year, but how close is that vote, and what's the perception, of those two, where you've got 2 of the top probably 5 guys in the Heisman race are going to be there in Charlotte? It's probably something the SEC can't say when you look at the biggest odds. I'd say some of the biggest odds guys, honestly, are in the ACC and in the Pac-12, it seems like. So what is the narrative around the ACC will be interesting. What does Jim Phillips have to say? I think his speech last year kind of largely mocked, and we talked to him a few months ago at Amelia Island, the spring meetings, but what's he have to say now is an interesting thing too, because it remains a very interesting time in the state of the ACC.
And to go on top of that, Curt, I'm also interested to see, as more and more stuff boils over in Evanston with the Northwestern scandal, what's Jim Phillips going to be faced with in that commissioner's forum opening day? What type of questions are he going to be asked? As a matter of fact, just got a notification even on my phone and brought it immediately to mind. Second player is now suing the school. That's according to The Athletic, and Jim Phillips has been named the defendant in that case. So there's only going to be more as we go up to that. What's things going to look like from his perspective? I'm interested to see, like you said, talking about Mike Norvell, I'm also interested to see what sort of questions he gets asked now that Florida State is perceived as the hunted again, as they're perceived as one of the top dogs. I mean, the first time we had ACC Kickoff 2 years ago, at least in the standard sense of 21, because obviously 20, we didn't have a standard ACC Kickoff. But in 21, remember, obviously the situation with Coach Bowden kind of really changed the narrative around what Florida State was going to be asked that year. Last year, it was very much about the pressure of, results, getting things done, trying to rebuild a program. And now the line of questioning is going to completely shift to, do you feel like you can be the top dog in this conference again? How do you feel? And like you guys said, Mike Norvell has really tried to downplay that, keep things internal. But I'm interested to see, when it's a new set of questioners and a new line of questioning, just kind of the different narratives that get brought to the table there. And also, on top of that, I'm interested to see how Florida State's rivals handle this week in Charlotte. Miami was the belle of the ball last year, and now Mario Cristobal is going to have to answer some really tough questions about where his program is, what the vision for it is, what the long-term future is, because there was so much optimism about the Canes going into last year. And then, obviously, whatever Dabo Swinney does is always going to make headlines at ACC Kickoff. And I'm interested to see, how does a guy who's so used to being the top dog, so used to being the prettiest thing, bell at the ball, now that Buzz Lightyear has showed up, how does Woody take it? So I want to see what it's like when not everybody wants to play with Clemson anymore. It's a little bit of Florida State's kickoff as well for the first time, probably since 2017. You're talking 6-7 years ago. So how does Clemson handle not being front and center of everything at ACC Kickoff? And how does Florida State respond to being back on that stage? That's what I'm actually really interested to see as a media member and as someone who just kind of follows the minutia.
Well, and hey, it's nice to kind of focus on different teams for once. It being this the first year of the divisionless format, you're not worried about NC State and Louisville, who you used to play every year. They're not on the schedule this year. You're looking at you're looking at what? You're looking at Virginia Tech. You're looking at Pitt. You're looking at Duke. It's a new crop, and it makes sense to kind of do away with the 2-day format where it was kind of Atlantic Day and Coastal Day, because, I mean, we're in kind of a new age, and I think it's right to spread things out and kind of just add the extra day. I think makes sense. I mean, the SEC does 4 days, so I think the ACC doing 3 is probably wise.
Yeah, I think for me too, I'm looking to see North Carolina, like you guys mentioned early, Drake May. What can they do this season? It feels like all the headlines, again, are Clemson, Florida State. I think a lot of people expect those 2 teams to play twice this season, and they very well might. But there are a few other ACC teams that I think can make a push here, UNC being one of them. Ryan, I like that you mentioned Duke. And Curt, that's going to be interesting, isn't it, with Duke on the schedule this year? So what do they do with Coach Elko, and what a job he did there? That's not going to be easy. So I wonder, we don't have NC State on the schedule, but they don't have Devin Leary anymore. And that's going to be something that Coach Doran has to deal with. Coach Clawson with Hartman moving on to Notre Dame. How does that shake things up for them? I'm sure they're going to face questions on that. And then Miami is the big one, right? I think a lot of people are wondering, all right, guys, you brought in Mario Cristobal, the hometown kid, and it was a disaster in year 1. What can we do realistically here to have Miami be back at the top of the conference? So a lot of things we're looking forward to. Jim Phillips, we'll see if he touches on anything else. This is another chance for him to touch on conference, not just realignment, but revenue that we kind of built the momentum of at Amelia Islands for a couple of days. I'm not expecting him to go into depth on anything. I don't think this is going to be that, but I'm sure people will be curious as we move into the new year. And it feels like there's always little rumors floating around. Hey, wait for August, where there will be more realignment and there will be a new TV deal and all. There's just so many different things that rear their head in late July. So we're going to have a lot of fun over in the Westin and in Charlotte. Should be a good time and a lot of things to get to. Ryan, real quick, what's the coverage looking like for WCTV up there in Charlotte, if you want to let our fans know?
Well, as of right now, we're slated to head up there, get the Commissioners Forum, head and at least get Florida State Day. Subject to change. There's a couple moving pieces around, but as of right now, yeah, we're expected to be in Charlotte. We're expected to be at the Westin for ACC Kickoff. But like I said, it's a busy time of year, especially, one person right now. So we'll see how things keep moving. We'll see how things keep going. But as of right now, I love going to ACC Kickoff. It's one of the best events of the year. If we're there, we plan on being live 5, 6, 11 o'clock, giving you everything you need to know from the Noles. And then obviously what you guys will be doing as well. So might grab you and borrow one of y'all for a couple minutes for live TV as well.
We've got the full gang going there. Curt, myself, Bob, and Pat, and it should be a good time with full coverage, podcasts, videos, interviews, written content, as good as anybody in the game. And Curt, it'll be interesting to have a full crew up there getting things done, and we will have a variety of different angles to bring you from Charlotte. I do want to transition into Curt this morning. Tatum, Bethune, Renardo Green had a chance to talk to the media about summer workouts. What were your takeaways from that? Anything come to light that you found interesting?
Yeah, it's always great. And we appreciate Florida State kind of going above and beyond to set up these. I mean, we had Jordan and Trey, like Ryan mentioned a few weeks ago. Now these two, nice to catch up with them, kind of hear the perspective of the defense and how the summer's been going for them. Tatum Bethune, pretty candidly talked about, he didn't want to kind of go into details or share them. I think I'm going to write something later today on the site just about he admitted kind of, I was banged up for pretty much all last year. He said he didn't go into details, but he kind of said upper body and lower body. So it seems like the dude was going through a lot, but was still out there playing a lot of plays for Florida State and making a lot of plays for Florida State. But I think you maybe saw kind of like a Jared Verse and some other guys, maybe as the season progressed, him start to wear down a little bit. I think you did see that somewhat. But yeah, no, I think a reset will do wonders for him. I think year 2 will do wonders for him. Renardo Green, I know, it was brought up, was the most improved defensive player last year. And he talked about kind of like, I finally got a healthy year, and I think it made a big difference for me. And he talked about how loaded that secondary is, especially that cornerback group now with who they've brought in both through the transfer portal, through the high school guys who are going to look to make an impact year one. And it's there's a lot to like overall about, I think, the defense. Are there questions? Absolutely. But I think they with all they bring back, there's a lot to like, and that was a talking point this morning for sure. I think they're ready to start ramping things up, it seems like.
How much confidence do we have in this defense this season to be able to, obviously that offense is going to get things done, right? They're going to score points. They're too explosive, too experienced on the offensive line. I think it's going to go well. I think, injury luck, fingers crossed, all of those things definitely being considered. Can this defense stop people? Because there were times last year where I do think the defense wasn't able to quite get off the field on third downs. They weren't quite able to flip momentum. They didn't create enough turnovers. Is this a unit that you think this season is ready to take the next step? Certainly getting all those guys to announce that they wanted to come back aids that cause.
Yeah, I mean, the injury luck, I would say, was not on their side. You talked about that last year. They didn't lose. I mean, Fabian Lovett, they lost for a decent stretch, but I think they didn't lose guys maybe for extended stretches for the most part. But I think there was a lot of guys playing through stuff that they were able to be out there, but they weren't maybe able to be the full version of themselves. I think, no doubt, I think a stretch of lesser offenses down the stretch of the season before the Florida and Oklahoma games, I think helped them. I mean, in terms of especially numbers wise of what they were able to do. But there are two, I think, offenses we think are going to be really good early in this season, and it will test them. I think I like a lot of what they did. I mean, bolstering depth at quite a few spots. They weren't able to maybe bolster at linebacker through the portal, but I feel good about what they have in the top few guys there with Tatum, Bethune, with Kalen DeLoach, with DJ Lundy. I know they've all been talking up Omar Graham a lot, and I know they've liked what they've seen from freshman Blake Nicholson coming in, whatever that means for year one. I'm not sure, but I think, like you said, injury luck on their side. I do feel better about the defense, whether that means better that they could make a playoff run or just better in terms of contending for the ACC is kind of, I guess, TBD. But no, I think there's a lot to like. I mean, you talked about the front seven, especially that line. I mean, when you have guys like Jared Verse and Patrick Payton going to be playing opposite each other, we'll see, I guess, Daryl Jackson in the waiver. The longer that goes on, the worse you feel. But I still think that defensive tackle group can be good even without Daryl Jackson. It's a loss, no doubt. It would be if you don't get that waiver. You hope he gets a Jordan Travis kind of August waiver like Jordan did back in 2019. That one went way into the year. But yeah, I think it has the potential to take that next step, to be sure.
Well, I probably should unmute my mic, fellas. Ryan, how confident are you that this Florida State defense can take a step forward? And how optimistic are you that they will be able to be an impact defense in college football this season?
Well, obviously, you've got to if you want to meet the goals that you've set out for yourself this season. If you want to set out the outward expectations, even though, like we said, Florida State has been trying not to focus so much on those. But like Curt said, this is hopefully going to be a much healthier unit coming into 2023. They've got more depth in key positions. You'd still maybe like to have another linebacker or so that's maybe a little bit more seasoned with the way that Florida State's worked the portal. But this year is going to be huge narratively for how I feel like people at large in this fan base, boosters, community feel about Adam Fuller, because he's been the guy that to this point has still kind of had those questions pointed his way. They're not all fair, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast of being a high-profile coordinator at a program like FSU. So I'm interested to see how that all plays together. Like we said, we think this front seven is going to be really, really good, save for some of that linebacker depth. But if you can keep yourself healthy, maybe that doesn't become an issue at all. So, yeah, I think Florida State can take that step forward, and I also feel like they have to, or else some of those questions and some of that goodwill of the program seems to be firing on all cylinders gets put back in the ringer and gets put back in the line of question.
Yeah, and so Florida State will definitely keep figuring things out defensively. I think Bethune and DeLoach locked in at linebacker. Renardo Green, I thought, played so well and has done well this offseason of locking down one of the corner spots, but you can never be sure. I think FSU this offseason tried to get better at the position overall, right? And they've recruited well at that position. So we'll see in August who ends up being the two starters, at field and at boundary. But Renardo Green, I think, has shown well, especially last season. Speaking of DBs, Curt, Charles Lester has Florida State as one of his favorites. What are you hearing there on the 5-stars recruitment?
Yeah, I think Florida State has been and continues to be in a good spot there. It's not over till it's over. And I mean, as we've learned in recruiting, even if Florida State lands the commitment here, and I think he's announcing on the 28th. What's that, next weekend? I think a week from Friday. I sincerely doubt that other teams will just stop recruiting him unless he totally shuts it down like some guys tend to do. But Florida State's played this recruitment well. They've built that relationship well. And I mean, they're in a position to, I think right now they are probably still the pick as things currently stand over Alabama, over Georgia, and over Colorado. Colorado is always going to be the wild card there. I think Dion is always going to appeal to the South Florida charismatic DBs like he was back in the day, and that's always going to make things tough. But Florida State's done well here, and I think they're still in good position. 9 days out?
Well, good football talk, I think. Went about 26 minutes on it. Let's finish with some FSU baseball. Link Jarrett hiring Ty Megahee from Pitt, who was working for Mike Bell, and he is now Florida State's new recruiting coordinator and assistant coach this season upcoming. And so that wraps up the staff for FSU. You got Micah Posey and Ty Megahee as your two big hires, and Jared Vanderglass moves up into that third paid assistant role. Megahee, a guy who's coached in the South, guys, was at Mercer, at Auburn. Link's known him from both. And I think there's a lot of familiarity there, right, and cross-checking when you talk about Mike Bell and Link's relationship about, just the type of coach that Megahee is. This is going to be your new recruiting coordinator. What are y'all's initial thoughts on Link Jarrett rounding out his staff?
I'm rather interested to see this hire because, as you mentioned, someone who's very, very familiar with Link Jarrett, coached with him at Auburn. On top of that, knows the South really well. But from a Power 5 recruiting coordinator experience, he's been at Pitt the last 5 years. And, the caliber of talent that you can recruit to be a Pitt Panther is a little different than the caliber of talent that you can commit and get you can recruit to be a Florida State Seminole. So I'm interested to see how he recruits on a high-end Power 5 level. Now, what's encouraging is obviously his background. He's been around the South. He's a guy from the South, and he's from relatively close by in Moultrie. Went to Colquitt County High School, a Packer graduate. That's inside our area. And, of course, as someone who covers a lot of the South Georgia baseball around here, I mean, we had Lowndes win a 7A championship over Parkview a couple months ago. I know how good that South Georgia baseball talent can be. So if you've got a guy who knows that area, has those contacts, he can really, really be a pull from there on top of obviously the stuff in Tallahassee and the Big Bend surrounding it. So I think that could be a plus there. But, this is a guy that clearly Link Jarrett is comfortable with, clearly has a background with. So I'm interested and I'm willing to take some time to see how this plays out. But, yeah, certainly a hire that came recommended. Mike Bell, a guy that's known very well around this program, knows Link very well. So it definitely feels like, to an extent, kept it in the family hire.
Yeah, I think I think it's a good hire. I think it's definitely a time will tell. I worry that the perception of the hire is viewed worse because of, I know Kendall Rogers put out that kind of Florida State, I think, was looking at some big fish. And obviously, I don't think you're classifying this as a big fish. And I don't really know what he was hearing on that front. I'm not going to conjecture on that. But I do think this is a hire. I mean, when you look at, obviously, he hasn't been at that prominent school yet, but when you look at what he's been able to bring in and how much easier it should be to bring in those types of kids, like Ryan said, to a Florida State, I think it's a hire. I think you're buying low on a guy who I think has a high ceiling in that regard. And I think I mean, obviously Link knows him well. Like you said, 2 prior stints working alongside him. And I think it speaks to what he believes he can do at a place like Florida State where Ty Megahee's never been. I mean, as a recruiting coordinator.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Curt. Fair or not, when you put it out there that you're taking big swings and big chances, when you open it up and you see Pittsburgh baseball, like you immediately, your brain goes, well, who said no? Well, who didn't come here? Whether that's fair or not, their narrative gets written, and it puts Megahee behind the 8 ball a little bit at the start. So we'll see how he's able to overcome that. Of course, it's not about the X's and O's. It's about the Jimmies and Joes, like Ron Zook used to say. So we'll see what sort of talent that he's able to bring in, what sort of stuff he's able to develop. Of course, Link Jarrett will stay in charge of this offense. But how does Megahee help on a day-to-day role in practice, inside the program, and what sort of talent can he bring in that's ultimately going to write the book? And the only way to get over that narrative of, well, here's who we settled on, is to actually go out and get some of those big fish.
I don't know whether it was Ty Megahee already getting to work or whether it was Link Jarrett, but while we've been on the air, Florida State landed another transfer. I don't know if you saw that, Ariya, to bring it up. USF grad transfer Daniel Cantu, who played, nearly 200 games at USF. I think primarily a lot of first base. So I'm thinking it's likely he'll fill that role. But he hit 300 this year. It's I think one of the more experienced bats they've added. I think it feels like a lot of the bats they've added have been younger guys, but that's some nice experience in the lineup. Seems like Ty Megahee may already be getting to work on that front.
And that also makes you glean, is the James Tibbs at first base experiment over? Is this a guy who's going to be there every day? What really looks like the future for number 22 on the infield versus the outfield?
Yeah, I don't even have to look it up. I've caught wind of this 3 days ago that he was coming, and big for FSU to get a kid from USF. And Cantu's a guy who hit double-digit home runs last year and has pedigree, track record, and Florida State's needed a first baseman who's going to be a lefty, 6'3", I believe, if I remember what I saw from his bio a couple of days ago when I checked. It is, to answer your question, Ryan, and I'm sure fans have been wondering, Tibbs wants to play outfield. And I think the coaching staff is committed to letting James Tibbs be an outfielder. He has spent the majority of the time, if not all of the time, in the Cape this summer playing outfield to improve there. That's where him and his family feel like his draft stock will be at its highest, and where his potential and future will be at its most optimal. And so FSU committed that to him and said, hey, you decided to come back for Florida State, didn't go to the portal, appreciate you, loyalty, and you're our best hitter overall. And you got to do that. And then they went and added another bat that I think is going to really do some damage here. And he's had some nice games against some big-name foes, and certainly a guy that Florida State has played against in the past, even if it wasn't last year, the year before. You've played against Cantu, and so you know what he brings to the table. It's exciting, right? We haven't had a natural first baseman in a minute at Florida State, and so that's something that I'm looking forward to. I was talking to someone on the phone yesterday about it, and I said, look, this team needs to get older. This team needs to get more experienced. And so if you've got a grad transfer that's 22, 23 years old, I'm all for it. Has had a lot of at-bats in his collegiate career, and is going to come in, I think, culturally, right? And in that locker room, provide a business-like mentality. He's here to play baseball. He's got 1 year left, and he's going to make the most of it. So excited about the Cantu hire, or the ad, I should say.
Unmute, Curt.
All right, I'm muted now.
I unmuted you.
my sound's been acting up. It's great that Florida State has brought in, especially some of the infielders, are guys who they're going to have for at least 2 years. Farrow, Lodice, Jackson West, Williams, I think are all guys who only have played 1 year of college baseball, and so they're going to have at least 2 here. But like you said, I think what they missed, especially in that lineup, when you have Jaime Ferrer as a sophomore captain, that speaks to maybe not having as much experience in that locker room, in that lineup, as you would like to have. And so I think it's a big add on that front, to be sure.
Yeah, so excited about that. I think Florida State fans will like him. He's got double-digit pop. And Curt, thank you for bringing that up. Glad it's official. Glad it's out there. And I do still think Florida State needs to add an arm. I think you need a weekend rotation arm somewhere. Jackson Baumeister is, by all indications and things I've heard, leaning towards signing with the Orioles. And I think he's going to get a payday that makes that well worth his decision to start his professional.
$1.2 million for his troubles.
I think it might be even more than that. And so when you see the number, if it comes out, it will be something that you go, good for you, kid. Good for your family. Go make us proud. But the Noles do need a Friday guy. Right now, you don't have one. Can that be Cam Leiter? Potentially. Could it be Whitaker? Potentially. Is it Yoel Tejada, who transferred from Florida, who apparently is lighting up the Cape this summer with fastball into the 97, 98 range? And maybe. But the problem is you don't feel 1,000% rock solid about your Friday night guy. And because of that, I think you need to go find somebody who's older in the portal. It doesn't have to be a sexy name, right? From a big-time school, from a Power 5. It can be, Virginia got to Omaha last year with two grad transfers one from Elon, I think. And I think Jason Parker was another mid-major kid. So it can be done, but you need guys who have had, the Friday night pressure. That's what I'm looking for. And someone who has done it for a year or two, right? At any level, and can throw strikes. Please, guys, throw strikes. Whoever it is, I can't watch another guy go in there and walk somebody on 4 pitches. So that's what's to do. And I know we were talking about Megahee, so let's wrap here. But I hope Ty is up to date. He seems like a younger guy that understands the transfer portal and NIL, right? And that's where it's going. That's where recruiting is going. And I hope that you have someone that's savvy, and as a staff now with Micah Posey, with Jared Vanderglass, and Link Jarrett, right? Other than Link, you've gotten much, much younger with the staff versus Restano and Wallace. So we'll see how that plays towards the future of college baseball and the way that you have to acquire talent, right? But plenty more baseball conversation coming up in the future. We'll have football next week. I'm not sure if we'll have a show Friday for Seminole Sidelines, but we will have shows from Charlotte and hoping to have interviews with Mike Norvell and some players to air on Seminole Sidelines. So keep us posted. Ryan, appreciate your time. As always, where can the fans find you and your work before we say goodbye?
Thanks, fellas. Of course, you can watch us on air if you're in Tallahassee, 5, 6, 11, and then again at 5 a.m. if you're an early riser. And then, of course, you can find our stories all the time, WCTV.tv, and, of course, the WCTV Sports YouTube page. So make sure you check all that out.
All right. Well, we are on Spotify and Apple for those of you wanting to listen to this podcast on demand. Those of you watching, we appreciate you. Twitter, Facebook, and, of course, YouTube. And also want to thank Mr. P.A. Noles 1 for the comment here and being a part of our show. But until we talk to you again next time, Ryan Kelly, Sports Director of WCTV, Curt Weiler, and Ariya Massoudi of the Osceola. And this has been Seminole Sidelines.